dear ministers, dear presidents, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, we will welcome you here in Berlin, in the Congress Hall on the Alexanderplatz, in the heart of Berlin. And in this morning we have had 3 sessions, very important sessions, on the tasks of cultural heritage. I think it was very important to discuss and to hear a lot of interesting input and about the questions, how can we bring our cultural heritage on the highest level of European policy? How can we use our cultural heritage to build bridges with our countries in Europe? I think it was so important to have that experience. I think it was very important to hear everybody and to feel how can cultural heritage bring us all together. And I think there was one most emotional message we have had. It was a message from the Prime Minister and Minister of Culture from Luxembourg. Xavier Bettel gave us such an inspirational message this morning.
Video.
Yes, it was by video. He cannot be here because it is a special day for Luxembourg. It is a national day in Luxembourg. Then he sent us a video message. But we have 3 more messages now we can share with you. We have 3 messages by heads of state. And after that meeting, after that concluding session, we will have, during the ceremony, the German president, Mr. Steinmeier, will come here. I think it is a great attention we have in the political world, and I think we need it for our big aim and for our big task. Dear Snezhka.
I also wish to you all a very warm welcome here in Berlin, and it is a great honor for me to be the co-chair of this concluding session of our European policy debate, sharing heritage, sharing values, together with my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Uwe Koch. And as you have just heard, we have a great honor to share with you, to read the important messages that we have received from a number of important heads of state. To start with, nous savons que le président de
First of all, the State President of France, Emmanuel Macron, has transmitted a message to us, and he asked us to read it out. There have been some technical difficulties in the transmission of the video, and therefore we have to read out the message, and here it comes. So I have the honor to read out the message of the French President. I am aware that all of you are assembled today, architects, restorers, curators, heads of institutions, funding agencies, students, researchers, and all of you are involved with a lot of passion and engagement. We need your mobilization, and your presence in Berlin in this Cultural Heritage Year reflects a truly French and European approach and will benefit our European cultural heritage. Culture has a decisive role to play, and we will not be able to develop it unless we are aware of its importance. When we speak of the European heritage, we speak of our identity and we speak of our future. I'm firmly convinced that if we are interested in our European cultural heritage, and if we manage to engage ourselves on behalf of that cultural heritage, we will be able to take a new step towards a new European project. Regardless of our differences, we are unity, we are a union, and We are bound by what is beautiful, by what is artistic, and we are also bound through our regions. We share a common dream, and we want to build something together. And we have to go about it in a dedicated way, and you are dedicated with all your professions from different walks of life. You have come together in order to call upon political decision makers to assume their responsibility and to develop a sustainable strategy for the benefit of our cultural heritage. And this also needs to be reflected in the long-term financial planning. We need this vision in order to be able to preserve what is inalienable and what cannot be reproduced should it be lost. This has something to do with sustainable life and with social inclusion. I should like to express my sincere thanks to all associations and institutions involved in the Berlin Initiative and who are assembled today in Berlin. Europa Nostra, the DNK, the German National Heritage Institution, and the Prussian Heritage Foundation. I should also like to thank the Federal Chancellor for her commitment, who from Berlin and from Germany has extended so much hospitality and has hosted this summit meeting. Everyone can get involved in this enterprise, and I wish that France will also make a generous contribution to this initiative. First of all, we have taken an initiative to enhance the commitment amongst the French public, and Stéphane Bern is an exponent of that. He stands for this commitment, and he is present tonight. At the same time, there are to be some cultural events that will take place in France in the autumn, and they will mark a successful end of this cultural heritage year. We depend on all those initiatives that are aimed at touching the public. Our imagination thrives on European culture, on the symbols, the monuments, the music, and the artistic creation. This room of imagination is important, and it must include also those that so far have been excluded. We need this space just as we need the Schengen area for a peaceful Europe where everyone can live peacefully and in prosperity. I wish us all a successful summit meeting in this European Cultural Heritage Year, signed by the French President of State.
And now it's a great honor to read the message, the letter of the President of Romania, Klaus Werner Iohannis. It is a distinct pleasure and honor to address on behalf of Romania the first European Cultural Heritage Summit. I strongly believe that linking the responsibilities of the public authorities together with the commitment of the civil society for advancing an ambitious European agenda and action plan for cultural heritage is of paramount importance. I am confident that this will be a lasting legacy of the European Year of Cultural Heritage. Romania is a firm supporter of our joint efforts of consolidating the European project. To this end, it is my belief that culture and cultural heritage are essential pillars of our endeavor towards the sustainable development of our Union. I take this opportunity to acknowledge the importance of protecting the fundamental achievements and principles of the European Union. This shared heritage is a very valuable resource. I would like to assure you that these significant values will be responsibly and diligently promoted during the Romanian presidency of the Council of the European Union. Klaus Werner Iohannis, President of Romania.
And the next and last message comes from Portugal, from the President of the Portuguese Republic. The Berlin European Cultural Heritage Summit, promoted by the Europa Nostra, German Cultural Heritage Committee, and the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation, under the motto Sharing Heritage, Sharing Values, constitutes a high point in the European Year of Cultural Heritage. From the very beginning, I have fully supported and closely followed the various initiatives in this context as a contribution towards the establishment of a culture of peace, based on the understanding of our common cultural roots, as well as the safeguard of what we have inherited from previous generations, thus enriching our own legacy to the future. The goal of the European Year of Cultural Heritage is to raise our awareness of European values, strengthening our perception of an open European identity, open to the world. Cultural identity, intercultural dialogue and solidarity, as well as to the interconnection between culture, education and science, must be particularly stressed nowadays. That is what is stated in the Framework Convention on the Value of Cultural Heritage of Society, signed in the Portuguese city of Faro in 2005. The notion of a shared cultural heritage demands an active citizenship and a shared responsibility, involving the protection of material heritage, monuments, libraries, archives, landscapes and nature, but also the valuing of contemporary creativity. Cultural heritage has to do with the permanence of shared values, but also with the safeguard of differences, by respecting as much what is exclusive and specific to each of us as what belongs to others, and what represents a memory shared by all. How can we understand Europe and the world without this constant dialogue between tradition and progress, or without respecting differences, or yet without the understanding of cultural roots as well as of the strength of artistic creativity and scientific innovation? The European Union's decision to dedicate the year of 2018 to cultural heritage at a time of such uncertainty and so many threats constitutes a hallmark on the path towards a European project of peace, hospitality, mutual help, human development, and cultural diversity. What is at stake here is a free and responsible citizenship and a union of free and sovereign states. A culture of peace can only last if it is based on care and awareness, on knowledge and understanding, on creativity and the ability to innovate. Signed, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, President of the Portuguese Republic. After these high-level messages, we have a few minutes reserved for some inspirational introductions. This morning and this afternoon, in the first part of this European policy debate, every session started with very, indeed, inspiring introductions. So we want to do that also this afternoon. And what better for inspiration than some music? And we have here a very special video message that comes from Malta, from Valletta. And it is, in fact, you will now see the world premiere of a very short video message that world-renowned tenor from Malta, Joseph Calleja, who is also a cultural ambassador of Malta, has kindly agreed to record for this special occasion as a contribution to Europa Nostra's Ode to Joy challenge. And he has chosen to do that in the oldest building of Valletta, the Church of the Our Lady of Victory, that has been restored thanks to the voluntary contributions and voluntary work and generosity of the members of Dinlart Helva Heritage NGO from Malta, that is also the country representation of Europa Nostra in Malta. So enjoy. I'm sure you have noticed that Joseph Calleja was not singing only in the original language German. It is for the very first time that somebody sang the Ode to Joy in the Maltese language, thanks to our individual member, John Vassallo, who translated the Ode to Joy. And it is also important to say, of course, why from Valletta. Valletta is the European capital of culture, one of the two this year. So it is great that in this way we could have established a European bridge between Berlin and Valletta. But you all know the music of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, but probably less people know the symbolism of the words, of the lyrics, of Schiller's poem. And that's why the second part of the inspirational introduction, from a Maltese tenor, we will invite a baritone ibérique. That's how we have decided to introduce Georges Chaminet, who will tell us a little bit more something about the symbolism of the Ode to Joy and of its relevance for our discussion of today. So, Georges, la parole est à toi.
Years ago, Beethoven wrote before the An die Freude of Schiller these words sung by us baritones. Freunde, nicht diese Töne. Schiller's choice of words demonstrates how much Beethoven wanted to invite us to a change of perspective, calling us humans to change parameters, placing us in the joy of fraternity, in the flame of creativity, in the constant momentum towards a better world. Our continent must change tone and assume with determination the universal values of mankind, of creation, of progress that are our humus, instead of reinventing the old frontiers of fratricidal battles. Providing we celebrate together the great geniuses of art and thought, which in all our languages and by constant mixing have given birth to immortal works whose freshness remains intact when we let the emotion, the feeling, the admiration overwhelm us. Beethoven, Victor Hugo, Dante, Cervantes, Shakespeare, Pessoa, Tolstoy, Cavafis, Ibsen, Kafka are among so many examples of that richness in Europe. Our culture is our treasure, and we must defend it. There is our common motherland, which no one can dispute. So let's not fear. Our project in Bougival of the European Music Center, Centre Européen de Musique, ne veut que donner corps à ce dialogue entre les...
This European project wants to inspire the arts, science, music. We want to find a universal language, and that will allow us to go even further. Let us follow the example of Pauline and Louis Viardot, Bizet, Turgenev. We want to do that to change our tone.
Rooted in its culture and in this mix that is the real DNA, to be found in respect of cultural biodiversity, I dare to say, which is represented as nowhere else by these links established by the great minds who inhabited Bougival. There, from the Urals to the Atlantic, the outline of a European conscience was drawn and was expressed by the extraordinary article by Victor Hugo, "The United States of Europe." Today, we must think of the children, think of this marvelous legacy that shaped history and the world, that we must give them in heritage. And to change the tone, as Beethoven demanded, he who was the musician able to lift everyone's spirits, to raise our thoughts, to dilate our hearts, to soothe our sufferings. Meine Damen und Herren, this is high politics. And to our high political Europe, the musicians are here. You are here. So let's change the tone. Heute müssen wir.
Today we must change the tone, as Beethoven demanded. Culture is our tone. It is rooted in mutual respect. Europe was built on the crossing and exchange of so many civilizations. And this is why we can open this new tone in history.
Let's open a new score, where we must assume that before being cultural actors, artists, we are human beings, citizens of this planet, with this marvelous heritage to share and a lot of dreams to realize. I count on you, count on me. Thank you, danke.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we are coming to the most important thing, the Berlin call to action. And I will start with the first sentence. The 2018 European Year of Cultural Heritage marks a turning point for Europe's ever-growing movement for cultural heritage.
We must build on this momentum to recognize and unfold the positive and cohesive power of our shared cultural heritage and values to connect European citizens and communities and to give a deeper meaning to the entire European project. Time for action is now. This Berlin call to action is presented at this European Cultural Heritage Summit by three co-hosting organizations, namely Europa Nostra, the voice of cultural heritage in Europe, the German Cultural Heritage Committee, acting as national coordinator of the European Year of Cultural Heritage in Germany, and of the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation based in Berlin. Of course, you all have on your seats, I hope you have found a copy of the full text of the declaration, but don't be alarmed, we will not be reading the entire text. Now it's you.
But I think we will focus some most important things, and that's why I have to continue. The Berlin call to action also builds on the input and support of the European Year of Cultural Heritage national coordinators, the members of the European Cultural Heritage Stakeholders Committee, as well as members of the European Heritage Alliance 3.3. We now invite all of those who care for Europe's past, present, and future to sign, support, and widely share this Berlin call to action.
As you have heard in such an eloquent and inspiring way from Georges Chaminet, we need to change the tone of the narrative of Europe. And our Berlin call to action is a modest contribution from the heritage world to this necessity. So you will see a full list of reasons why we think that there is a necessity and why there is even an urgency for taking action. And so we invite you to read all this, and all these reasons have been discussed in a marvelous way, in a very forceful way, during the 3 sessions, the opening session and the 3 discussion sessions that we have had earlier today. So we would like now to concentrate on the 7 action points that form part of the Berlin call to action. So Uwe, the first action for you.
Action 1, developing the European Action Plan for Cultural Heritage. We call for an ambitious European Action Plan for Cultural Heritage as a lasting legacy of the European Year of Cultural Heritage. This action plan, which is already announced in the recently adopted new European Agenda for Culture, must be prepared and implemented with full involvement and engagement of all relevant public and private stakeholders, including civil society. It must also be holistic and interconnected with other key EU policy agendas and priorities, fully in line with the recent conclusion of the EU Council. And Action 2.
Recognizing heritage as a priority for European policies and funding. In support of the future European Action Plan for Cultural Heritage, we call on the EU institutions to fully recognize cultural heritage as a strategic priority in the upcoming policy programs and the EU's new multi-annual financial framework 2021-2027. Action 3.
Yes, bridging local, national, and European. We call on all states, regions, cities in Europe to continue to develop holistic and ambitious policy and action plans for cultural heritage. This should complement each other and are coherent. Action 4.
Preserving and transmitting the irreplaceable. We must boost the necessary human and financial resources and invest in skills and capacity building in order to ensure proper preservation, development, and transmission of our heritage, which is unique and irreplaceable, yet often vulnerable and even endangered. So we should also recognize the value of intangible expressions of our heritage, which are constantly evolving and enriching our society and living environment. Action 5.
Investing in quality heritage-led regeneration. We must ensure and enable adequate investments, public and private, into quality heritage-led regeneration of our neighborhoods, cities and countryside, based on creativity, innovation and adaptive reuse. I think there is a main important thing from Switzerland, Baukultur. Action 6.
Promoting better knowledge and deeper understanding. Cultural heritage must be given a much bigger importance in education activities, both formal and informal, for all ages. Special attention must be given to history education and heritage interpretation placed in the broader context of Europe's past, present, and future. And this will equip Europe's citizens, and especially our children and the youth, with the necessary tool for gaining a deeper understanding of the ongoing encounters and exchanges within Europe, as well as between Europe and other cultures of the world. And finally, Action 7.
Building on the momentum, we must consolidate and further improve the synergies between the widest possible range of public and private stakeholders, including relevant European and international organizations and civil society. To achieve this, we need to find an adequate formula for a more permanent platform for gathering knowledge, capacity building, and coordinating advocacy for cultural heritage in Europe.
These were the 7 actions that we have enlisted in the Berlin Call to Action. You all have, as we said, the English test. We apologize that today we have only 1 language version, but we promise that this text will be translated in as many languages as possible. And these texts, all these linguistic versions, will be available on the website of this summit. And we now wish to invite everybody present here in the room, but also all other women and men, organizations, institutions who think that it is worthwhile to join forces and to support this call to action, to sign it either here while you are in Berlin or at any other moment via the online media. So this was our presentation of this important document, and we now, I think, want to invite our panelists, because we have a very prestigious panelist with whom we will already be able to discuss these important recommendations and call to action. You invited me? Alors, nos panélistes, nos membres de panel. I first call here Madame.
The panelist, Françoise Nyssen, Minister of Culture from France. Please come to the stage.
On va vous mettre au milieu.
A very warm welcome. Please be seated right in the middle of the panel.
So the Minister of Culture of Greece and of Croatia with us today. But we would like now to invite Luis Filipe de Castro Mendes, Minister of Culture of Portugal, to join us at the stage. Welcome, and especially to both ministers, we kindly ask you to transmit personally the thanks to your presidents for the important messages that they have sent to our summit. We invite now Mr. Karl-Heinz Lamberts, President of the European Committee of the Regions, to join us on the stage. Welcome here. Welcome. Please take the seat next to Madame Nyssen.
Welcome.
Luca Jaillet, President of the European Economic and Social Committee. Luca, bienvenue. Nous avons parmi nous Stéphane Bern. Et il sera là avec nous, founder. Je pense que beaucoup de gens vous connaissent, mais je vais quand même vous introduire. Of this year's EU Prize for Cultural Heritage Europa Nostra Awards in the category Dedicated Service. So in a sense, through Stefan, all the laureates are represented in this panel this afternoon. And then we also have Professor Dr. Hermann Partzinger, President of the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation, and also Executive President of Europa Nostra. So. We will speak various languages, I think, and as you know, we have the interpretations in English, French, and German, so we will be mixing and sort of having this conversation in various languages. So, on va commencer en français. On va commencer en français et
We will start in French. I have a question to Luca Jaillet at first. the President of the European Economic and Social Committee. Luca, I had the pleasure to attend one of your conferences where you gave a speech, your first speech as the new president of the Economic and Social Committee. And this speech made us very happy because you mentioned 4 priorities, one of which was culture. This was your very first speech in your new role, and that has rarely happened, that a new president of this committee focuses on culture. And this is why I ask myself, and I would like to ask you, why do you believe that these days it is so important to give priority to culture? Is that a matter of urgency right now? Thank you very much, Snezhka, Europa Nostra, the presenters, and thank you very much for having invited me. I did mention culture as one of my priorities. Of course, that is unusual, especially for the Economic and Social Committee. But culture does have an intrinsic value, and it has an important role to play. What I mean is this. Only once did a representative of the French cultural sector play an important role in politics. I believe that it is important to focus more on culture, and this is because we are in a complex situation at the moment. We live in a complex environment. An Italian artist once said that Europe is an idea, and it was an idea of culture first because before it turned into an idea of governance, and we've lost that vision a bit. And this means, you know, we've just heard that we need to set a new tone. We need a new narrative for Europe. I believe that is true. I coined the term Renaissance for my presidency, and this is not a coincidence. I wish for a renaissance of the European Union. I think it is necessary. And 4 points are relevant for that. You know, Renaissance started in Florence, and culture was a driver. And you also need an openness towards science, because this is also a complex field at the moment. Leonardo da Vinci was someone who was a scientist, but also active in culture. What's also important is the role of those who give funding. In Italy, in times of the Renaissance, those who gave the money were very important. So the donors need to be included. This is what Europe was built upon at the end of the Middle Ages, or after the Middle Ages. The situation was complex back then, and it is complex now. So we need to act now. Otherwise, we might not be able to survive this crisis as Europe. We will only have isolationism instead of a common vision. I worked in Krakow, and I have my office there. What was important to me in my work there was memory, remembrance. You know, if we just applied the Copenhagen criteria, everyone would be united. But what we did not think about is that all European countries have different cultures of remembrance, and these need to be balanced. Not every country has a proper culture of remembrance, and not all countries deal with their histories in the same way. Just think of the Birkenau concentration camp, where the trains arrived, and the first thing they did was separate children from their parents. I visited that camp just recently, and it was shocking to see it. And now we're seeing very violent images from another part of the world. We saw these images just a few days ago, a young boy screaming because he was separated from his mother at the US border. The only difference is that in Auschwitz, parents were sent to the gas chambers, and now in Texas, they're sent to prison. So how can you do that? Where is your humanity? I believe that we have to think about how our culture can help us preserve our identity. We need a new language for that as well, a new language which can give us a positive narrative, a motivating narrative, a narrative that leads to a stronger commitment and that unites us instead of creating new divisions. At the moment, the fearmongers are driving wedges between us. And I believe that culture can be a means to counter those tendencies. Culture can give us the positive energy we need to create a positive vision of Europe for tomorrow. And we need to achieve that together. We need every single theater, every single place of culture. We need a general call to everyone. Vote whoever you like, but do vote. Participate in your societies. We need greater participation and engagement of the civil society. Otherwise, we will go back to dark times, maybe even darker than those of the past. We will be divided, and we've seen where that can lead us. These are the reasons why I decided to make culture one of my priorities. And there are other reasons for that too. Culture enriches our lives. Just look at Italy. 90% of the area around Torino are an industrial area, or they used to be. Today, 70% of activities in that region are cultural activities. This means that culture has completely restructured our lives, but it is more than that. Culture is a resource. It helps us focus on who we are, what our roots are, where we want to go, and it is important to keep that in mind. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very passionate about this cause.
Dear Minister Nissen, the President of France has invoked the meaningful power of cultural heritage in some very impressive speeches during the last time, and I think we heard the greetings today of your President. You have also made a forceful call to refonder l'Europe par la culture. This has created a clear momentum for culture and cultural heritage, both at the level of the European Council and at the level of the Council of Ministers. Our Berlin call to action clearly refer and respond to this positive momentum. What are the next steps? What do you think?
Merci. Je voudrais d'abord commencer pour...
Thank you very much. I would like to get back to what the previous speaker said. We are living in times of a crisis of identity. It is a very dangerous crisis. I was in Great Britain yesterday, where we met some of the citizens there and many people who are very committed to culture. I think Stefan Bern can tell you more about that. It is important for us to stay committed to Europe and use culture as a vehicle for that. I was very moved when I saw the commitment of so many people. And we are not talking about industry here that is often seems egocentric. I have a background in academia, but I've always been convinced that it is important to always think about culture as well, because that can really bring about change, that can bring about a better world. I am from a city which has important cultural heritage. I'm talking about Arles in the south of France. And the population decreased for a while, but now it is increasing again. And that started with culture. Culture then led to an economic revival of the city. The Ode to Joy reminded me of my discussions with my colleagues. Also, there are schools that have classes where they integrate refugee children, and they start communication via music. They sang the Ode to Joy together, and I saw how happy that made the pupils. I saw how good it was for them. I saw a concert by Syrian musicians yesterday, and you see, culture is all around us. And music serves as a means of communication. I believe that you can really bring about change with culture if you are passionate about it. Monika Grütters, who I would like to convey my greetings to, I think she's doing great work. She focuses on the importance of culture for integration. We signed a declaration in Frankfurt about the necessity to renew Europe using culture. Jean Monnet said if we had to found Europe again, then we should do that on the basis of culture. Victor Hugo once gave a speech on budget matters. He said, of course, you need to be prudent and you need to save money where you can, but do not cut on culture. And that is essential because this is the greatest treasure we have. Just look at those speeches by Victor Hugo so many years ago. We need to have a budget for culture that must not be cut. And this way we can move forward. And this budget needs to be high enough. Of course, it is never easy to get money for culture. Robert Schuman, 1950, said, Europe will be a project of, or will have to be a project of solidarity. And we can do more here. We need an Erasmus for Culture program. We need programs that enable exchange between young people. 3 million European students have participated in the Erasmus program so far. Now we also need an Erasmus program for artists because they need that opportunity too. Translation is also essential. You've mentioned how important it is to strengthen linguistic diversity. Umberto Eco said translation is the language of Europe. And you need a budget for that. obviously. It is a fact that some people and some organizations have the European spirit in their DNA, like the Arte TV station, for example. They need funding. We also need to promote concrete initiatives so that we can show every single European in their daily lives what it means to be European, what it means to have a European dream.
Lieber Herr Partzinger, wir haben 2014.
Dear Mr. Partzinger, in 2014, we started developing ideas and the initiative for the European Cultural Heritage Year. We have been cooperating with you in order to prepare this summit, and many efforts have gone into this event here. So what, to your mind, are the strongest impressions of this Berlin summit? And what is your view? What will remain? Were these efforts worthwhile, the efforts to organize this first European summit? I think it was at any rate worthwhile. Yes, and the timing could not have been better, unfortunately, I must say, because Europe is not in good shape. It seems to be exploding. It started 10 years ago with the financial crisis, youth unemployment in southern Europe in particular, the refugee crisis, a growing level of populism in Germany too, and we need to come up with something different. And when I see and feel the passion here on the panel and the passion that I experienced in the workshops, I attended one on conservation technology on Tuesday. That's a special discipline which is important for the preservation of monuments. And people are burning with passion because they know what is at stake. We pursue two objectives. We want to do something in the various disciplines to conserve and preserve our cultural heritage. That's one field. And the second field is that we want to use and harness the cultural heritage in order to strengthen European identity, in order to drive integration. It is obvious that Europe is not supposed to be just an alliance of purpose. Europe must be built on democracy, human rights, prosperity, social achievements. That's the basis. But if one of these pillars starts to crumble, there are centripetal forces that menace Europe. And there must be something that binds people in Europe, with something that keeps them together even in times of crises, rather than having Europe collapse. In the speeches of President Macron, it becomes clear time and again, and he highlights it time and again, that culture is what binds people together. But it is important to spread the message, and the new agenda for cultural heritage in Europe, the action plan which has been announced, must be about disseminating that message. Cultural heritage is a materialized history. If I look at Germany, the knowledge about history is the prerequisite in order to understand our monuments. And history teaching in Germany used to be more systematic in the past than it is today. And this is where we need to start in order to reach out to people. And of course, young people. Today we saw fascinating young people who stood up and who are developing digital things, digital solutions, and they have their own form of communication. But it's not just about these students. We need to involve all layers of society. And the museums are also important because the big museums have millions of visitors each year. So they reach millions of people. And it's important to share the message which with all of them. Culture always has a message and always has a narrative. And this is why we are looking forward to this exhibition that will start in September in Martin Gropius Bau, which is called Moving Times, where we will present those epochs in German history that had a European dimension. And you will see that migration has always been there, and migration makes up the richness of Europe and has resulted in many positive things. If we engage with our history, then we can develop a long-term perspective which is decisive for assessing the present-day situation and for deriving the right lessons and consequences. President Lamberts, it was one of the most impressive discussions that we had, the discussion that we had on the links between the local and the regional and the European levels. So building bridges at the local level, in the neighborhoods, in the regions, and making sure that people discover what binds us as Europeans. This is something that I should like to link up with. Your institution, the Committee of the Regions, what do you think can your institution contribute towards this process that we are discussing here? More even than states, the regions and cities of Europe reflect and illustrate and embody the diversity of our continent. And this is what you experience every day in the Committee of the Regions. And it's important that we go into the cities, into the regions, in order to give as many Europeans as possible the opportunity to do that, so that they can discover this diversity and take something home as something that enriches their own lives. Culture very frequently is history, but culture is also about the future. It is very important to look into the future through the glasses of history and of culture. And we must warn against certain misunderstandings. Identity is something important, of course. Identity means that you are rooted at home, in your home region. And it would be wrong to talk about a European identity which would replace that identity. Quite to the contrary, it must strengthen that original identity. But the European identity must prevent something that we see, unfortunately, very frequently today, where people sell us identity as something that divides people, something that makes me consider someone else my enemy, and something that will result in a nationalist development. No, having regional roots, having a regional identity gives you the opportunity to open your mind. And what makes up Europe is the richness of our continent and a multitude of regional identities. Wherever you go in Europe, you can discover something new. You can open your mind and you can enter into an exchange and undertake something in common. And this is what we need. Yes, the tone makes the music, as we say. And it is high time in Europe to change the tone. Listening to what in the past few years and past few days has been said, I'm afraid, I must say. And there is something that's very important. If I consider diversity to be something that enriches us, we must overcome borders. And this means that I have to ask myself what is behind my values and my convictions. When Pope St. Francis a few years ago was awarded the Charlemagne Prize, he started his speech with the words, "What is going on in humanist Europe?" And he then gave a speech which everyone who stirs up hatred against foreigners in Europe should read. We should not just talk about culture, but we also need to spend money for culture. And this is another important goal. As Commissioner Oettinger was said, this big Europe is where people are prepared to spend just 1 cup of coffee a day on Europe. And the share of culture in the European budget is very small indeed. So whenever we discuss financial frameworks and future perspectives, we should be more courageous to spend a bit more money on culture. Well, a lot has been said about commitment and engagement. Here we have a selection of very committed forces who work for the benefit of culture. And I am happy to have so many experts on the panel who bear political responsibility. And now I should like to address a question to you, Stefan Bern. You know how to communicate with the public. What would you advise us to do? We have listened to this Berlin call for action. We have adopted it. And now there may be many people who want to get involved. How would you address them? How would you communicate with them? How can we communicate more effectively with them in order to make sure that the message gets home? Yes, that's a big challenge, of course. The first challenge, to my mind, is to take the floor after so many important previous speakers who are political decision makers. Mr. Lamberts has already spoken out as someone who is passionate about culture. So from the Kaisersberg in Alsatia, I have presented a very successful TV program. There is a successful TV program which is called The Most Beautiful Village in France, which has been on air for 7 years. So, and I present villages in that program. And this is something that the French feel very close to. The French are very closely tied to their local cultural heritage. They are enormously proud of their local cultural heritage. And maybe we can derive a lesson from that. The cultural heritage is a treasure which you cannot transport. You can relocate a factory, but our monuments cannot be relocated. These old stones cannot be relocated because they tell a history about us. If you are in the south of Spain, for example, you have migration tales. On the basis of the cultural heritage, you can tell this history of migration waves. If you are in Sicily or in Naples, you will find those Baroque churches which can also be found elsewhere in Europe. And this is something that people are very close to. Mrs. Nissen said that the cultural heritage is the cultural resource that everyone is surrounded by in his or her everyday life. It might be a church, a bridge, or whatever. And whenever you look at it, you see that it is beautiful, and you see that it reflects your own roots. And even if you have come from somewhere else to the place where you live now, you adopt that cultural heritage, and that monument that you have in your village will tell you a story about Baroque, for example, or about the past of this place. And then you get interested in learning more about the past of that place. And then you suddenly find out that this cultural heritage, which is very rich, is a treasure like crude oil or gold. And this is something that needs to be recognized and acknowledged. Otto von Habsburg once said, "Never forget, when the language remains silent, the stones are still there to speak." And I have spoken to many activists. There are also social projects involving delinquents or young criminals who are supported in their efforts to reintegrate into society. And there are excavations, for example, in which these people are involved. And it was said that stones reveal the innermost of a person. And wherever you go in France, and Minister Nissen will know this better than I do, wherever you go in France, you have this passion for the European cultural heritage. But on a local level, that is our natural resource, and this is something that binds us and ties us with our neighbors. It creates a common basis, and it's something that is inside us, that is part of us. I also have roots in Luxembourg, and Robert Schuman was a great European. I am so happy that all of you are committed to defending the European heritage. It's important to know where you come from, and it's important to know where you are going, where you're headed for. If you do not know your history, you cannot plan your future. This is something that we need to be aware of and something that we need to recall. Often people say history is no longer important, but that's not true. If you drive a car and if you do not look into the rear mirror, it can be very dangerous. You always have to know what is behind you, and you need to know where you come from. So these are maybe a few arguments that you could use in order to better communicate the significance and importance of cultural heritage. Many nice things have been said already. The cultural heritage makes it possible for you to live in your region. Cultural heritage is also something that you can harness for tourism, for example. And tourism, after all, is an important economic factor for the gross national product. In my own hometown, I noticed this. An old building was restored, and this created jobs. 15,000 people suddenly came to take a look at it. Then a hotel was opened, then restaurants opened, and then there were boutiques, shops. And suddenly the whole town had taken a new development. People came back to live there, and suddenly a new class opened because the number of the population had increased. And having a school class in a town or village school, this is very important, and there is a lot of community in these villages. And that's the villages in France which look for a twin town in Germany. And this creates links with Germany. All of this has to do with culture. Thank you, Stefan. I love optimists. I should like to take up your optimistic message in order to say that indeed we are not fighting a losing battle if we go it together. And now I should like to pass the floor to the Portuguese Minister of Culture. Stefan said that there is no contradiction or conflict between the loyalty to one's local roots and the cultural heritage in Europe. Is that something that is on your mind too, and what are your views on this? I should like to know what your ideas are concerning this bridge between the local and the European heritage, and also to the science, this bridge that is so important between the different levels. Yes. The local level is a starting point, and then we move to the more universal level. To us, Portuguese, the European feeling is a very strong feeling. Our identity, just as the European identity, works on the basis of a dialogue. In the past, there was also violence and war and assimilation. Together we learn also with in our connections with other cultures. Our project is not a Eurocentristic project, and I say this coming from a country which achieved its independence only fairly late in history. Country which is very much oriented towards the sea. And our country has had a lot to do with trade, and there was also a period of colonialism, of course. But there have always been people who were able to understand how other people feel. One of those representatives was able to enter into a trade agreement with China, even in the Middle Ages. So the prerequisite for doing that is that you need to be able to understand the other side. So we are open to others. And you correctly said that migration is something that has always existed. And migratory movements have also pushed our own development. We are a nation of migrants and immigrants. Many Portuguese people emigrated to Brazil and America, and in recent past to France, Germany, and other European countries. Portuguese people are more than just Portuguese, as Fernando Pessoa once said. We are special in that respect. Of course, we also have our flaws. Everyone has his flaws, and every nation has its flaws. But we always think that our basic attitude is that we expect something good from other people, from other nations. In the past, there have also been wars and battles, that's true, but the idea of solidarity and cohesion and of mutual understanding is deeply rooted in our nation. And this helps us build bridges between ourselves and others. This means that the local can be reconciled with what is universal. Of course, there needs to be control at the political level, but this fear of strangers, the fear of the future, the xenophobia, this is something that is directed against European values, the European values that make our European Union what it is.
We would love to continue this conversation for hours, but alas, time is always running quicker than we would like. But we would like, just before we make a break, because of course this is not the end of our program. We are all looking forward to the start of the European Heritage Award ceremony in 1 hour. But we would like, in fact, to ask each of you just very briefly, would you be prepared to sign the Berlin Call to Action? And would you be prepared? Luca has already said it, so we have a positive answer, but would you be prepared to disseminate it and share it with the others and encourage the others to sort of join that movement and our mobilization? Stefan, you have 500,000 people following you on Twitter, so you know, that could help.
Yes, I will. Of course I do, but I do it any time of my life. Vous savez, quand on a
Just very briefly, since I was a child, I love Europe, I love my country, but of course I also love Europe and I love everything that's related to culture. And every part of me, every part of my body lives this cultural heritage. And I would sign with both my hands if that was possible. So I think this call to action is immensely important. We need this call. It is really something that we need for the future of Europe. It will protect Europe against the imminent threats. And for the first time, I agreed to do something different. I will add something to my work. I will make a new TV program on Europe in addition to my usual TV programs, TV shows. It will only be announced in September. France 2 talked to me about it. I want a strong Europe, so from September until the European elections, I want to make Europe the dream of TV viewers. I want to show our rich cultural heritage, and I want us to have famous artists on our Euro bills, Pessoa or Cervantes. People like that should be on the Euro bills. Molière, Shakespeare, Victor Hugo, of course. Whatever you can imagine. I don't know if I may say this here, but that's really something I would like to see. And Europe depends on people who are committed to culture, and we should honor those.
Merci, Stéphane. On continue.
Thank you, Stefan. We are counting on you, and you can count on us.
Quite an empire in the Committee of the Region. All the regions, all the cities in Europe. Imagine if all of them would join this movement, we would be, and we are, a great force.
Ja, das stimmt, wenn es
Yeah, that's true. If we could convince the 100,000 municipalities and the 300 regions in Europe to support this call to action, this would certainly be a powerful sign. But today, I will say that I'll sign it for two reasons. First of all, we agree with the text. I had the opportunity to read the text. It's really a great declaration. It's really spot on. But secondly, and this is even more important, I am deeply convinced that culture is the means that will give Europe the momentum it needs. Jacques Delors once said, well, you cannot fall in love with an internal market. It probably makes more sense to fall in love with your wife or whatever. But you can fall in love with culture as well. And that is a feeling we should encourage. And culture can provoke these feelings.
Madame Nissen.
Mrs. Nissen, we just heard what the French president said. He said in France this fall you'll have these cultural meetings, discussions on culture. So I really have the impression that France will take over from Berlin and take this call to action to Paris as well. So can this Berlin call to action be helpful in inspiring these discussions? Well, yes, of course. There are several calls to action. Stefan is doing this at the local level. Civil society in general is very committed to this cause. And I'm a scientist by training, so I like this idea of a catalyst. Associations, institutions, everyone needs to contribute to paving the way. There's this way, this path we need to embark on, and we must not stop. We need to go to do this step by step. And you said you like optimists. I fully agree. We have to remain optimistic. Of course, there are always dramas and challenges, but pessimism will not lead us anywhere. We need optimism and we need determination.
Merci. On va utiliser cette expression beaucoup. Monsieur le ministre.
Thank you. We now move on to the Minister of Culture from Portugal. Will you sign the call? Yes, of course, we already signed. And what is even more important is that we will fill this call with life. We want to launch action. This has to result in a movement that recognizes culture as a priority. And we are already well on our way. I was really proud, like a schoolboy who gets a good grade, that the 3 most active countries in this cultural heritage year are Portugal, among others. And so we are working on this. We are focusing very much on the local level, on local issues. And Europe plays a major role as well, and we should not underestimate this. There's the European Social Fund, for example. This is very helpful for very practical things, such as restoring old monuments. And I'm also an optimist, and I would like to give an optimistic quote. It's an answer to François Nissen by Hölderlin, a German poet, and he said, wherever you see pain, you will always have people who can save you.
Thank you for being with us and supporting us. Already said that you're going to sign. Any other questions? I suppose you will be in the front rows of the mobilization for the implementation of this call to action.
Yes, I already said that they will sign, and they will confirm they will sign with many conventions. And I am very glad of some very particular, because we are more and more used that the only language spoken in Europe now is English, and today no one of us has used English until now. So as an Italian, we'll use English also as a signal, a bridge towards our friend from United Kingdom, where we are leaving the major division in the history of Europe. After 41 years of being together, we'll be going to be divided. And I hope culture can stay as the first element of a bridge that we have to rebuild with them. I will sign also because, quoting what the President Lambert was remembering before about the word of the Pope Francis that asked Europe, have you lost your heritage, your humanistic heritage? Also to remember another Pope, John Paul II, when he was elected, the first word he used, don't be feared. We have to fight the fears today. And the way to fight the fears is culture, because culture raised to us the sense of 3 elements. The sense of good, the sense of truth, and the sense of beautiful. And these 3 elements could be the sense of the change of tone, of the change of narrative. And just to end up, I was also, of course, cultural heritage is not only about stones and monuments, it's much more. But we have also to take stock of one lesson that came from a very old architect, the Roman Vitruvius, that he established the 3 criteria for an architect. saying that the role of an architect is not only to build some buildings, to prepare, to design, but also to organize the space of relation in the private and the public space. And the three criteria for making sense for this was written by Vitruvius many centuries ago, were the following. You have to do something that is useful, that will last, that will raise our views and our soul. These three criteria are fundamental criteria that culture could deliver to us to reshape the future of Europe. So these are the reasons as I will sign this declaration and will involve myself for letting this alive and arrive to reach the result that is claimed for. Thank you.
And to end, I would like to ask Hermann Partzinger, I can't ask you, are you going to sign? Because you are president, because you are the president of the organization. You are the president of one of the organizations they are promoting. And I know very well that you are committed, and as Europa Nostra as executive president. But so, the next step, how we are going to combat the fears and how we are going to sort of promote all together this optimisme de la détermination.
Ja, es wäre in der Tat etwas albern, wenn ich...
Well, it would be kind of silly if I said here that I need to think about signing it because I contributed to the drafting of the call to action and I saw this document evolve over time. I think this call to action has the potential of creating this sense of optimism. And I can assure you that we will do everything legally possible to confront our visitors in museums and libraries with this call to action. There are millions of visitors every year, and we will certainly try to familiarize them with this call. President Steinmeier once said, well, Europe is the answer to 2 world wars. And in 2018, 100 years after the end of the First World War, you can think such thoughts. We are 400 years after the 30 Years' War. Read the book by Münkler on the 30 Years' War. It's a thick book, but it's really worth reading, and it shows us how much this period in history still shapes us today. So Europe is really the answer to hundreds of years of devastation and destruction, and I just do not understand how people can forget this today. And another thing is important to me, and I want to pour a bit of water in the wine. It's great to work towards European cohesion, European identity, preserving the cultural heritage. We have heard a lot about that. But at the same time, there are 2 challenges that are interlinked. First of all, we have to create stronger links between the people and Europe, and we must integrate those who come to Europe and who are not integrated yet. This morning on the panel, the colleague from Sweden said a person who is somewhere but does not connect to the place where he or she lives will always be a stranger. This is decisive, and this is where the cultural heritage has huge potential. On the Museum Island, we have a program for refugees from Syria and Palestinians, and we train them to become guides in the Museum for Islamic Art. So, and we do not only train them to explain their own culture, we also train them in the Bode Museum, where you have the Christian artifacts, and they also come to the German Historic Museum, and we familiarize them with German 20th century history. And it will not take long, and then you'll see a woman from Syria explain a sculpture by Riemenschneider to a visitor in Berlin, or you'll have a Palestinian tell them about women after World War II. I think there will be a before Berlin and after Berlin, and this is why this is worth working for. The Berlin call to action is an important step towards the future, but the work is just beginning. This was an excellent concluding statement. It really was a call to action, and the first action will be to sign this call, and we want to make this for all the world to see. If you're not able to sign today, you can do it using digital media, and I would like to call upon you all to sign this document. The time to act is now.
Wait to sign the declaration. You can do it immediately now, and then there will be young volunteers who will be there. There is a bag with a sign of our summit, so you can sign it and put it in the bag, and we will collect all the original signature of those of us who were present in Berlin and who signed it here.
No drinks without signing.
Thank you.
I hope you fill it up. I hope so too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Please look at the camera. Thank you. That's it. I hope you fill it up.